that would be good. Okay, I think I'll start, and because I have a few of the introductory things to do first. And first, welcome everyone to our Eastman Cares Lunch and Learn on this very snowy day. Really appreciate you all being here with us. Everyone probably knows this by now, but I'll go through the thing anyways. This is a webinar, and so we will not see you. All of your audio has been muted. However, we do encourage questions, and our speaker, Miranda, will answer them as we go forward. Paul is actually going to monitor questions, but we do ask you to put them through the Q&A because it's just a lot easier than putting them like in the Q&A in the chat and trying to go back and forth. So if you can put them in your Q&A, Paul will be monitoring them and Miranda will answer them as we go forward. As you probably heard, we are being recorded, and the recordings will be available on YouTube, which Lori takes care for us, and it's usually relatively quickly, although today's Friday in the middle of a snowstorm. But that we have seen that people have been viewing those on the Eastman website, and so we do encourage if you know anyone who couldn't come to this talk or who is interested in the topic to please go ahead and view it on the YouTube video. What else? Let's see. I'm Sue Etkine. Everybody probably knows that by now. I've been attending these, and I've got Paul Etkine, who's actually sitting upstairs, who's going to monitor the questions. And we had a great education team over the last few years with Sally Wood and Kendall Card. Carol Wood, and Elise Kendall, who have helped us out. So I want to thank them as well. A couple other announcements about Eastman Cares. We do have a resource guide, which is updated periodically, actually, which really is a very good document to help you with all kinds of potential resources that you might need. It is available online. Again, it's on the website, on the Eastman website. It's also available at South Cove and at the center in hard copy if you need it there. The second thing that we do is we have the eCares connection, which is a way for you or anyone you know who might need to just have a conversation with someone to be able to talk to someone. And it could be could be daily, could be weekly, could be monthly. And it's really for anyone. We have I don't say a bunch, but we do have volunteers who are willing to do that for anyone who needs it. So if you know of anyone or you yourself thinks it would be helpful, reach out to Eastman Cares at eastmanh.org, and that could be arranged. The third thing that I wanted to talk about is something that's relatively new, and that's Eastman Cares Tech Help. And that is something that we have just started. And we have had, I think Bill Madsen is the one who does it. He's had about 11 calls for help so far with all kinds of tech issues, phone, TVs, whatever. I think a garage opener was one, but he has been responding to those calls, and we encourage you to take advantage of that resource as well. That resource is at eastmancares.techhelp@gmail.com. Okay, eastmancares.techhelp@gmail.com. And again, it's a great resource, so please take advantage of that. I think that, even though we're winding up this year, we still would like evaluations and comments and suggestions. And again, so if you have any of those for us in terms of upcoming educational sessions, it's the same thing, Eastman Cares at eastmanh.org. And we really do encourage that. Okay, so finally, I get to introduce our speaker. And I'm very excited that we have Miranda Albano. Miranda is experienced in physical therapy. She's with the VNA at the moment, but she is experienced in the settings of a hospital medical surge in service unit. Occupational therapy, outpatient services. Her focus there was on upper extremity rehab and occupational health-based ergonomic office, workplace, and job assessments to reduce risk for injury and assist employers to provide reasonable accommodations for employees. As I said, she's currently at the Lake Sunapee VNA and Hospice, where she's a physical therapist assistant and an occupational therapy assistant. So we're very happy to have Miranda with us today. And I can invite her to share her screen and start the presentation. Thanks, Miranda.
Thank you. Let's pull up the presentation here. Oops. So this is a variation of a presentation I used to give monthly. It's the first time I've given it on this platform, so please be patient with me and feel free to comment or ask questions as we go along using the question and answer forum. So today, this is a topic that I really enjoy talking about. So I want to thank you for coming, taking the time to view this, whether it's here live or at the recording. The goal is really to empower you. These are lifestyle changes, things that I hope you can apply to whatever role, whatever work you're doing throughout your life to reduce your risk for injury. Let's see if I can move this so I can see. So I like to start the presentation by promoting occupational therapy. Most people know what physical therapy is, but few people have a good understanding what OT is. So using the question and answer forum, what is occupational therapy? Does anyone know?
So they have to answer by Q&A.
Yes.
And if they can't answer you directly.
So I'll give it a couple of seconds, and if not, we'll continue. So occupational therapy, if you focus on that first word, occupational, typically you're thinking about work. So occupational therapy helps people do the work of living. Anyone who has been a stay-at-home mom, anyone who's retired, they know that you don't have to be paid to be working. You can be an artist, you can be a volunteer, you can be a mother or a father, a grandparent. Those are all roles and work that you need to do throughout life. So occupational therapy helps people do those things and fulfill whatever roles that are enjoyable to them, whatever roles they need to do throughout their lives. So our objectives today are to define what body mechanics and ergonomics are, to identify what neutral body position is, and to apply that positioning to your own environment and also whatever activities you are doing throughout the day and throughout your lives. We'll also have a brief section on how to adjust a long-term sitting area, such as a computer workstation. And our goal overall is to reduce risk for discomfort, strain, and injury, so we don't see you in physical therapy for those things. So the leading causes of injury, this is specifically at work, but it also applies to whatever work you're doing throughout life. One is overexertion, strenuous pushing, pulling, lifting, carrying, holding, or throwing objects. A common cause of injury is a fall, whether it's on the same level or down a level, whether over a curb, onto stairs. Another is bodily reaction, standing, climbing, bending, slipping, tripping, reaching, or climbing, being struck by an object. And finally, our most common, stress and strain caused by repetitive motions. Now, the stress and strain is something that we have a little bit more control over than these other categories. Many of these things are just accidents. You can't reduce the risk as much as you can with something like strain and stress by repetitive motions. And thankfully, body mechanics and ergonomics can help with that. So first, let's define what body mechanics is. It's a buzzword, but many people don't have a good definition. So what I tell people is when you think of body mechanics, think M, movement. How we move or position our bodies, including our posture, is body mechanics. And as soon as I say the word posture, automatically, I'm sure most of you straightened up in your seat. Maybe you're thinking about your grandmother or your mother telling you to sit up straight. So at the core of good body mechanics is our core or our posture. So if you look at our spine here, we have 3 natural curves: in at our neck, out at our thorax, and then in again at our lumbar vertebrae. So a little bit bigger picture of that. So when our spine is in this neutral position, it supports our body weight and the weight of whatever we carry in the most efficient way. So if you notice at the bottom of our spine here, we have bigger, thicker vertebrae, more meant to be weight bearing, whereas up here at our neck, there's smaller vertebrae, not as meant to carry weight. So when we have good posture, then our spine is working most efficiently, both the muscles and the bones. Now, when you think of the word neutral, perhaps you think of Switzerland, you think of something balanced or aligned, not going to one side or the other. And I like to use the analogy of a rubber band. So if you have an old rubber band, it's become brittle and you stretch it too many times, what happens? It becomes weak, it might snap eventually. The same thing if you have a new rubber band and you continuously stretch it to its max, eventually it has micro tears and it will break. Our body is very similar. Usually it's not just one action that causes the injury. It's an accumulation of many actions over time and extreme movements. So our first thought is to do a body scan. If we're having pain, think about first what part of your body hurts. Then think about what position is it in right now? What position is it in when I'm doing an activity that I commonly do? And why do I think that it hurts? And finally, can you modify your position or the activity to be in a more neutral position? Our first topic here for applying that neutral position is principles of safe lifting. So when you think about transitional movements, they affect the curves of our spine. Remember that natural in at our neck, out at our thorax, down at our lumbar spine, especially when we're carrying a load. So we want to ask ourselves, should I be lifting this? Do I have enough space? What do I have to hold? How big is it? What's the weight of it? Should I get help? And what is the destination? Make sure your footing is secure and your feet are apart. Give yourself a nice, good base so you don't have to worry about tipping over as you're lifting. Organize the workload to reduce repetitive floor to upright overhead motions. So for example, if you're putting groceries away, think about moving objects from the floor to knee level, then to shoulder height, and then above the head, instead of going from the floor to an overhead cabinet repeatedly. Something we also want to think about is the load that we're carrying. A good rule is if you're carrying something further than 10 feet away, use a dolly or a cart. Or if it's something heavy, also think about using some other method, a backpack, a dolly, a cart. Reduce the amount of work you have to do. So now that we've planned what we're lifting, what we're carrying, think about how we're using our technique there to keep that neutral spine. So if you look at this picture here, our first picture is the wrong way. And if you notice his back here, well, what kind of curves are in his spine? Is he keeping those 3 natural curves? No. A lot of the strain is more here on his neck and upper back. Remember, those are muscles, those are bones that aren't meant to carry this load. And our right way picture here, notice his spine has more of those natural curves. And ideally, this picture would have his feet flat on the ground so he has a good base. So that's why we really want to try to squat or kneel when we're first lifting versus bending from the hips, especially if something of any type of weight. We also want to think about stabilizing our muscles, our stomach muscles, our butt, really trying to tighten those muscles to give our spine as much support in that neutral position as possible. Keep your back upright. Think about your ear over your shoulder, over your hips, that plumb line here, here, ideally here, and then the ankle. We also want to use smooth and controlled motions. If you need to use momentum or a quick jerk to get something moving, it's probably too heavy for you. So you would want to leave that, see if you can have someone help you to move the object. Also think about keeping the object close to you. If you've ever lifted a child, you don't lift them far away from you because that's too much strain here on your shoulder. If you can keep things closer to you, closer to your core, usually in this box from shoulders out as far as your hands can reach with your elbows close to your body, and then down at the top of your pelvis. That's really the box you want to try to operate in when you're holding something. We also want to avoid twisting while we lift. If you twist your spine, it's a twist of your vertebrae plus a compression. So again, think about that rubber band twisted to its max and then put in a strained position. There's an increased risk over time of injuring, or even one time if it's a big enough load. We also want to think about making sure our path is clear before we start the lift. It's no good if we start our lift, we're lifting something fairly heavy and we realize there are many obstacles in the path. It's something that we might have to step over, could increase our risk of tripping and falling, or we might have to put the object down and pick it up again. And as always, if it's something that's too heavy, get help if you need it, or use assistive devices, whether it's a trolley or a cart. Look at what things you have around you. The goal with body mechanics is really to work smarter, not harder. So for those who may be in caregiving positions, something to think about is lifting considerations. So based on OSHA, our lift limit should be 35 pounds. That's what they consider safe, consistent lifting weight. So if you're applying this to caregiving, there's something that we use in therapy called levels of assistance. So we'll use an example here of a 150-pound person. If you're doing about what we call minimum assistance, so doing 25% of the work or lifting about 25% of their weight, of a 150-pound person, you're lifting about 37.5 pounds. So even if you have two people, you're both lifting about 19 pounds. If you increase the amount of assist you're giving, so let's say you're lifting 50% of that weight, you're lifting 75 pounds. And if two people are doing that, then you're above that 35-pound weight limit. And if you're lifting 100% of that person's weight, obviously that's about 150 pounds. So that's a good consideration if you're helping someone up from a chair. Think about how much work you're doing and try to cue them to do as much of the work as they can, make their movement as efficient as possible so they can help. Something else to think about is if you're helping someone in and out of bed, how much a limb weighs. So this is a study that was done in an orthopedic setting, basically holding a limb for casting. So in this chart, you see here in the highlighted areas, a patient who's weighing somewhere between 140 to 190 pounds. One leg would be about almost 30 pounds. And if you go up a weight level here to 190 to 240 pounds, one leg is approximately 37.7 pounds. So again, that's above that OSHA recommended weight limit, 35 pounds. And usually you have two legs you're lifting at the same time. So it would be double that. So that's something we want to keep in mind if we're ever helping someone in and out of bed or in and out of the car. Again, trying to get them to be in a position where they can help as much as possible, or having multiple people to help us, so we reduce our risk for injury there. Next, let's talk about pushing and pulling. Obviously, it's something we want to do safely, whether it's pushing a cart or a lawnmower or anything else. So ideally, we would want to push rather than pull whenever possible. We look at this picture here. Again, think about those neutral curves of the spine, in at the neck, out at the thorax, in at your lower spine. So if we see this middle picture here, he has more of that neutral spine position. This third picture here, where he's pulling, doesn't really have that natural curve of his spine. Again, most of the weight or the force is through here, his neck, his upper back. Again, places spinal vertebrae and muscles that are smaller, not meant to take that kind of load. All of the strain is coming from his shoulders instead of larger muscle groups such as his legs here in the pushing position. We also want to think about leg position when we're pushing. Think about when you're walking, your momentum is forward. So when you're pushing as well, you want to be in that kind of position. So you're shifting your weight forward instead of working with feet together. Also, if you're using any kind of devices, we've all had that grocery cart with the wheel that wobbles and it's very difficult to push. If it's something that's not working correctly, it means you're doing more work than you have to. So keep our devices well greased, motors working. If you get that wobbly wheeled cart, maybe think about putting it back, telling a worker and getting another one. No need to work harder than you have to. And again, make sure your path is clear. You don't want to be stopping, pushing, pulling things, or tripping over anything while you're doing this. And get help if you need it. So another time we start to see that change in position of our spine and that natural alignment is when we sit. So we have an example here. If you were to lie down and hug your knees to your chest, what happens to that lower curve of your spine? It flattens out, right? So the same thing happens when we're sitting. You see that lower curve of your spine flattens out and everything curves. You get most of that weight, again, here in those smaller muscles, smaller joints, smaller bones of your neck. And that's usually why if we're in a position where we've been hunched over working in front of us, we don't have that support of our low back, we start feeling it in our shoulder and in our neck. So that's really where ergonomics comes in to help prevent that kind of pain and strain. So when we're thinking about a seated working position, this would be our ideal position or neutral position. You think about 90 degrees throughout, 90 degrees at our elbows, 90 degrees at our knees, 90 degrees at our ankles. We want to support that curve of our spine. So having that lumbar support in the chair is very important. We look at this image here of the muscles that support our spine. The muscles that control our posture are much smaller muscles, small muscle groups that aren't meant to make large adjustments consistently. They're meant to make small adjustments over time. So these muscles fatigue if we maintain one position, and even faster if we're in a non-neutral position. So as an exercise or an example, if you wanted to stand up and you just squat up and down for, well, let's say 10 seconds. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, and now this time Squat down just a little bit safely, and we'll hold it for 10 seconds without moving. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now, which activity was more difficult? It was the holding, correct? So that's an exaggerated example. If we're moving like you were when you were squatting up and down, it's not as tiring, not as straining as when we have to hold one position over time. And that applies when we're sitting in a chair. If we're sitting in one position for a long time, those postural muscles don't have the endurance to maintain our position. So we start shrinking and sliding down. Usually the position we'll see ourselves in at the end of a movie, slid down to the end of the couch. And so that's especially true if we're sitting in one spot for more than 15 or 30 minutes at a time. It's harder for our bodies to stay in that neutral position. But thankfully, we are very inventive as human beings, and we're able to use the environment to put our posture muscles in a better, more efficient position. So we have to use the environment around us to do that. So how do we do that to support neutral seated positioning? And that's where ergonomics comes in. So when you think of ergonomics, think E, environment. Ergonomics is how we set up our environment to work more safely and more efficiently. Oops. So one example of that might be if you use something like a cane or a walker. It's something we want to try to set up with a height that's efficient for us. So usually our rule, and this may change depending on the person, but in general, the height of the handles of a walker or a cane should be level with your wrist, the crease in your wrist when you're standing upright with your arms by your side. We also want to think about reaching safely. So if we're looking for an item and perhaps we're using a walker or some device in front of us, get as close as possible so we're not reaching. And again, putting all that strain here in our shoulder versus arms closer to our body. And the same is true if we're looking to get something that's above shoulder level or below shoulder level. The further we're reaching, the more strain we're putting on our shoulders, on our neck. Our back is not in those good neutral spinal positions. So maybe for one light item, it's okay. But if it's something we're doing repeatedly, or we already have injuries to our spine or our shoulders, it's something that we want to be especially considerate of. So it might mean safely finding a stool that's meant to be used to step up onto to get an item that's high up, or it might mean using a reacher or a grabber to get something that's on the floor, or pushing a chair closer to the item so we can sit and then reach down, depending on our physical capabilities.
Miranda, we have a question.
Okay, what is it?
Talking about the height of handle.
Yes.
Would that include things like golf push carts?
Yes, ideally, if it's anything that you're pushing for a longer period of time, or that has a significant weight to it. So I'm not sure if you're thinking like a laundry grocery cart. You said a push cart.
Golf, like for golf clubs.
Oh, for golf clubs. Usually for that you tip it down. So you would that's a little bit different because of the way you use it. Usually there's a tilt to it, correct? And then you push.
I'm not sure if that would have to be typed in.
Yeah, I guess I'm not very familiar with that, with a golf push cart. but in short, I guess,
Oh,
no
yeah,
problem.
yeah, no problem. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so it would really depend on the item. If it's something that you push on all four wheels flat, and it's something that you're pushing over a long distance of time consistently, then you'd want to think about height. If it's something you're only pushing for a few moments and not necessarily over heavy terrain, difficult terrain, it's probably okay. But good question. Something we also want to think about is protecting our joints. So if we're carrying a grocery bag and we already have arthritis or hand pain or some sort of injury, grasping tightly to those plastic bags with the thin handle, you'll find that a heavy plastic bag, that's a lot of strain on the small muscles and joints in our hands. So if you have those issues, you might think about putting the bag across your forearm if it has thick enough straps, if it's not very heavy. Also thinking about using built-up handles on writing utensils, even wrapping something like Coban or vet wrap around the pen or the pencil if you have arthritis or if you have pain in your hand. And if you're using things in the kitchen, opening jars can be difficult. There are so many different options we have for using equipment that can make that easier. So I encourage you to do some research, try to think about, again, if those things are causing you pain, how can you modify the activity so you're not putting strain on those small muscles and joints? Another example of if you have issues with arthritis or pain in your hands, think about the way you're holding things. Avoid anything that puts a lot of tension on just a few joints. Try to use all of them together to reduce the strain on just a few. And that's the same here, this example with a coffee cup. If you have a lot of pain in your hands, a lot of deforming arthritis, maybe think about a cup where you can put your hand through the handle like this instead of having to hold the handle like this. I'm not sure if you can see my picture as I'm demonstrating that. And also when we're getting up from a chair, think about avoiding crushing those joints. If you have pain already there, think about using the palm of your hand or keeping your wrist straight if you're using this method. So we'll briefly go over an ideal computer station. Again, this is only applying if you're spending more than maybe 30 minutes at a time at this station. So if you have an adjustable office chair, there's been an influx of these type of chairs on the market that are more easily obtained for the general public. So it's nice to know what some of those adjustments might be so you can make that chair work for you and keep your spine in a balanced position when you're sitting. So there is an order to that adjustment. Not all chairs will have all of these adjustments, but we'll go over them just in case. So the first one we usually find by accident is our seat height, and then the seat angle, the depth of the seat pan, so how far it comes behind your leg, the angle of the back, so the recline, and then that lumbar support height that supports that low curve of our back. So here's an example of our seat height. So ideally, if our feet are flat on the floor, we want our hips, our ankles, and our knees at 90 degrees. That would be the ideal position. And it's not easy to understand or see this unless you have a mirror right there beside your chair. So you can either have someone take a picture for you like I did here, or you can think about the amount of pressure. So you would want equal pressure under your thigh, the knee end over here, and under your hips or butt. And if you close your eyes, you can usually tell where there is more pressure. If there's more pressure in your butt I think this, yep, here we go. If you have more pressure in your butt, that means that the chair is probably too low. If you have more pressure here under your thigh, that probably means your chair is too high. Next is the seat angle. So ideally you want that angle to be parallel to the floor. This isn't usually an issue with most common chairs. Don't usually have an angle adjustment. But if you're noticing that the chair is not parallel to the floor, you might be looking for this kind of adjustment, the seat angle. Here's some examples of that. This chair is tilted back, so you can see that it's not parallel to the floor, and the seat is tilted forward. So if you're noticing your chair has either of these situations, try to look for a paddle and see if it will change that tilt of that seat pan. This is a very uncommon adjustment. I don't see it a lot on chairs you see at home. It's more in an office setting, but some chairs do adjust the depth of the seat pan. Sometimes there's a sliding mechanism. Usually it's a bar in the front or a small lever. You can pull the seat pan out further to expand it. Ideally, you want 2 to 3 fingers between the edge of that seat and the back of your knees. And if your thighs aren't well supported, the tilt of your pelvis changes. So it feels like you're sitting maybe on the edge of the chair, and that affects the curves of your spine. So even if you don't have this adjustment, you might want to think about it if you're purchasing a new chair. If the seat pan is too deep, I think I have another picture. Yeah, so if the seat pan is too deep, you'll start feeling this pressure on the back of your knees. It'll feel like you can't sit back far enough in the chair. Maybe your feet are dangling. If the seat pan is too shallow, that usually means that you have more pressure here, further back on your thigh. And there's a lot of space in between your thigh where the chair ends and your knee. And finally, the back angle. Usually you'll find that most office chairs have this feature. You want it to support you in full upright. You see that nice lumbar support there, keeping those curves of the spine in at the neck, out of the thorax, and again at your low spine. Too reclined, obviously, you end up reaching too far for your computer or whatever work you're doing. If you're too far forward, you'll feel like you're perched on the edge of the seat or you're leaned forward in the chair. And again, that lumbar support. Not all chairs, again, have this, but in this particular chair, if you lift the bottom of the seat up, it's on a ratchet mechanism, so you can hear it click as it adjusts. That might be something you can check for. Other chairs will have a knob on the side with a bar that slides up and down. So if you see that knob on the side, that probably means that your chair has a little bit more adjustment than you think it does. You can play with that and see if you can get it in a good spot. And if you don't have this adjustment, some people will use a small towel or a pillow in that area. You can play with the height of that. You know, if there's no support or if it's too low, you'll feel like your upper back is away from the chair or that you're slouching like this. You see the flat, that area where you're supposed to have a small curve is flattened out. If that lumbar support is too high, it will feel like it's pushing you out of the chair. And again, you'll probably have a tendency of sitting on the edge of the chair. If you do have armrests on your chair, you want to be conscious about how far away they're putting your elbows from you if you're using them. Notice her picture here. They're further away from her body than what we would usually like. Again, remember that ideal position is with your elbows tucked into your sides comfortably. It's the most efficient position. Otherwise, you end up with this pressure here on your shoulders and on your neck. So if you do have those armrests, just make sure they're not interfering with how close you can get to the desk or how far your elbows are from your body. A lot of office chairs, if they do have these armrests, they're either swing away or you can remove them. Just look at the hardware on the bottom of the chair. You might be able to remove them. computer monitor, something that's important to think about is the distance of it. So typically for someone who doesn't have corrective bifocals or specific computer glasses, typically you want that computer about arm's length away. So if you put your arm out, usually about at your fingertips or a little bit further, a couple of inches away from that, 23 to 28 inches. And you might have to play with it a little bit. If you're used to having that computer really, really far away, bringing it close too fast might bother your eyes a little bit. So it's an adjustment you might want to make just 1 inch at a time until you get used to it. And if you have bifocals, you'll find that the computer needs to be closer and lower than on average. So you can use those bifocals to read. It really depends on where the information is on your computer and what kind of lenses you have, how you look at the information. So it's something you want to play with. If you find yourself tilting your head up to see, you might want to lower the computer monitor down. If you find that your neck is in this position often, you might want to think about a way to either slide that monitor up, stack it up on a couple of books. The same is true if you're doing Zoom meetings consistently and you find you're tilting your head one way or the other. The goal is to keep your head in a good position. Talked about that height. Usually you want that top third of the screen at about eye level, unless the information you're looking at on the screen is typically lower or higher, or you have those bifocals, trifocals, reading lenses. Again, just think about the position of your head and where your neck is hurting you. And anything else in your office, if it's something that you touch more than 2 to 3 times an hour, keep it close to your body so you're not reaching, bending, stretching too far to get that item repeatedly. When you frequently move your elbow away from your body, away from neutral, you increase that load on, again, those smaller muscles, on some nerves in your back and your neck and your shoulders. So if it's something you find yourself constantly reaching for, just move it closer, at least for that time period. And you can always move it back if you need to. So usually for people, that's things like printers, or if you're a crafter, items that you're reaching for frequently. So here comes your opportunity to brainstorm about practical application of these principles. So think to yourself, what kind of activities make your body yell at you? What things after doing or during doing do you have increased pain, increased discomfort? You're extra sore when you wake up in the morning. It could be things like making a bed, raking leaves, especially on days like today, maybe shoveling snow, vacuuming, putting away groceries, driving. Think about what positions you're in and what activities cause you the most pain. And then do that body scan. What area of my body is having pain? What position is it in? And how can I change it so it's closer to that neutral position of my shoulders, hips, knees, ankles, and again, that spine position. So listen to your body. Pain is there for a reason. It's protective, and it's to tell you that something is wrong and needs to be changed. So in brief review here of ergonomics, good body mechanics is good posture, which means a neutral or balanced spine. Ergonomic environment supports good body mechanics. And you might encounter ergonomic equipment such as that adjustable office chair, a footrest or keyboard tray, a document holder if you're inputting information frequently, adjustable computer monitors, or just add a couple of books or a couple of reams of paper to adjust that height. You might use a step stool or ladder or handle extenders for things if you're dusting, or if you're tall and you use, I don't know, a vacuum cleaner, you need it to be a little bit higher. Make sure you know the adjustability of devices you're using. Adjust it to your body. And a reminder to take micro breaks. So if you're sitting for more than an hour at a time, try to think about changing your position at least every hour, hour and a half. Our bodies don't like to be in that one position for very long, even if our workstation is set up perfectly, which we know we can't do. So just remember, try to get up, move, do a little bit of a stretch. It's easy to forget if we're watching a show, we're reading, we get involved in something. So you can set a reminder on your phone or an email so you don't forget. A lot of smartwatches now have a setting where it will buzz to remind you to get up and move if you've been sitting for a certain amount of time. Make use of that kind of technology. Just make sure you're moving as much as possible, even if it's just a few minutes at a time. Get up, do a little stretch, get a drink of water, use the bathroom. Just try to stay moving. And a few preventative stretches that we can go through. Just remember that stretching should not be painful. We have receptors in our muscles that cause our muscles to tighten in response to pain. So you should feel just a gentle stretch, but no pain or discomfort. You really want to hold a stretch for at least 15, 20 seconds. And you might be able to stretch a little bit further after those first 10, 15 seconds with time. It's really important that we breathe and relax into the stretch. And then try motions opposite what you find yourself doing most often. So typically we do a lot of work in front of us. So thinking about stretches that pull our shoulders back, pull our head back. So here are some good examples of that. A chin tuck, either lying, sitting, standing with good posture, and gently pulling your chin back to a comfortable position. You shouldn't feel strain in your neck, shouldn't feel strain in your low back. It's just a very gentle motion to get your head in that neutral position. Make sure you hold that 10, 15, 20 seconds, 10 repetitions, just enough to get your head back in a good position and used to being there. Another is a shoulder blade squeeze. So trying to think about pinching those shoulder blades back, bringing your shoulders back. Very, very gentle, shouldn't feel strain in your low back or your upper back. And it's easy just to do a YouTube search or a Google search of preventative stretches. Just make sure if you have any recent health problems, injury or surgery, or if any of those motions cause pain, consult a health professional before starting your program. We talked about this a little bit, but if you're doing something only for 15 to 30-minute increments, you probably don't need a whole lot of ergonomic equipment. Usually just getting up and moving is enough. You don't need to spend a lot of money on whatever ergonomic equipment is on the market. All right, so that brings our presentation today to a close. What questions do you have?
So currently, there are no questions in the Q&A.
All right. And does anyone have any suggestions for things that could be done better or alterations to the slide for the next presentation I do?
Yes, we do appreciate feedback, and Miranda is specifically saying she would appreciate feedback about her slides. I loved her slides, actually. And I don't know about you, but I found myself moving this way, that way.
Thinking about your posture as I say it.
Doing. So, I mean, I really appreciate it. I think that was an excellent presentation. And as I said, if you can't remember all these things, this will be a YouTube video available on the Eastman website. Yeah, thank you. I thought that was a wonderful, excellent talk. And thank you and the VNA for sponsoring this presentation. And on that note, everyone can think about whether they're going to shovel and how they're going to do it, etc. And how you're currently sitting at your desk. And thank you again, Miranda. That was a wonderful talk and a lot of things to think about.
Well, thank you all for being here.
And we have some questions.
No, the last few comments have been thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Emma and Joan and Julie. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
Wonderful talk.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, enjoy the weather and watch your posture, okay?
Yes, happy snow day all. Goodbye.
Bye.
Take care.